Sounds like Europe. Cross-border podcasting.
Hello and welcome to Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting, a project brought to you by WIPAD. I am your host, Javi Caminero. A few weeks ago, I was talking to a colleague from the WIPAD project about this podcast. We were basically reflecting together on what we have done so far, what we still have to do and talk about during this year. And he asked me, what do you like most about doing this podcast? And to be honest, even though I'm aware that this can sound a bit cheesy, I think I like everything about Sounds Like Europe. Being able to know the processes of the WIPOD productions from the inside, talking to podcasting experts from all over Europe to know which formats and genres are the most listened to and why. But I believe that what I like and enjoy the most is discovering the state of the podcasting industry in different European countries. I have already been lucky enough to talk to podcasters in Poland, in Hungary, and Portugal, and it's really exciting for me to discover how podcasts evolve, grow, and reach different levels of popularity in different parts of Europe. So, bearing that in mind, today we travel to Ljubljana. One of the most popular podcasts there in Slovenia is Lovim ravnotežje, which more or less means chasing balance. I couldn't think of a better way to talk about podcasting in Slovenia than chatting with one of the hosts of that very successful podcast. Nina Gaspari, welcome to Sounds Like Europe. How are you?
Hi, Javier. Very good. Thank you.
First of all, tell me about your podcast. I think I didn't butcher a lot the pronunciation. Lovim ravnotežje. What is it about and how long have you been doing it for?
I started my podcast in December of 2019, so it will be 5 years soon. I started it because I really enjoyed listening to American and English podcasts for years. And I thought it would be really nice to open this channel in Slovenia because the podcasting world in my country 5 years ago was quite small. I wanted to open a channel where we would discuss how to find a balance in your life, how to find the balance between the roles that you're playing in your life. I opened this podcast with the intention of inviting people, especially women, because this is my general public, let's say, to be brave enough to start opening their businesses, to be brave enough to discuss the challenges they have in their lives. And I can say that after 5 years, this hobby of mine became my business idea and basically my job now, full-time job.
So you were a listener before you turned into a successful podcaster. But how has this journey been so far? I don't think it has been maybe easy. You will tell me. But how would you describe this challenge so far?
It's been a very organic path. I started this, as I said, as a hobby. I never expected this to become my way of living, my way of my source of income. Let's say it's been very gradual. I think one of the things that we notice all over the world, what helped podcasting world inviting people to come and join this medium has been also the pandemic. We spent more time at home. I think we had more time to do the things that we enjoy doing and listening to other voices, to other stories, to channels. And I think that this last 4 years gave a boost to podcast as a medium. I can see this even in Slovenia now with how many new podcasts have been opening up in the last couple of years. I was definitely not the first one. There were others, some of them even more than 10 years ago, that started their journey. But it became a very rich environment for people to create their stories and gain their voices. So it's been an organic path. It's been a path that I really enjoy. So much so that just about 2 weeks ago, I opened a new podcast. So I'm kind of building a little bit of a network here of different topics that we're covering.
And what's that new podcast about? Tell me.
The new podcast is called Herrera, which means like her era, and it's dedicated to women who are going through perimenopause and menopause, which I think is a topic that we need to discuss more, not only in Slovenia, but all around the world.
You were telling me before that when you began your podcast in 2019, podcasting wasn't so big there in Slovenia. Now you have just told me that the last couple of years have been like the main witness of this podcasting boom there in your country. So when would you say podcasts began to be really popular in Slovenia, and how did podcasts get there?
I would say that the biggest boom happened in the year 2021, 2022. Um, because now I see before you had quite a strong podcasting base. A few of the media, like the national radio and TV, they had their own podcasts, or basically they were putting um, their shows also on the podcasting channels. You had some creators that were working on it for the last 10 years or even more. But I think that in the last 2 years, maybe three, you can see a really big boom in creators that are coming out. So that they're independent creators like myself. But also, one thing that I see is that a lot of different medias are now using podcasts to support their other channels like print media, online media, TV shows, radio stations, and so on. So I think that the last 2 or 3 years have been really, really bombastic, let's say, when it comes to podcasting in Slovenia.
Yes, you know, podcasting is in a good place in your country when other types of media come here and want to do their own podcast. Um, when you have a look at the charts in Slovenia, you find podcasts about economics, some conversational podcasts. I saw maybe some comedy shows as well. So, what are the most listened to genres in Slovenia? And do you think, looking into the future, into the near future, there are some other genres that will grow soon?
I think one of the most listened to, maybe even if we don't look at the topics or if we don't look at the categories that you can choose, I think the most listened to podcasts are the ones that are opening a space for conversations. So you have, even if it's a comedy or if it's a more mental health or economy, finances, if you have people who are driving the conversations in a way that it's very difficult to have them in different in other parts of the media system, those podcasts can be very successful. So you have, even in Slovenia, you have hosts that I, I, I hate to do this, but I will use a reference. So you have hosts that tend to be like Joe Roganish. So they have this long form podcast conversations. You have comedy shows that are hosting different celebrities or interesting people. Um, and what I see as a trend, and I don't think has to do with the topic as well, but what I see opening up on our market that hasn't been really taken advantage of yet is corporate podcasting. So companies that are now considering opening their own podcast channels so that they can build stories about their projects, products, services that they cannot introduce in traditional media or social media and so on. So companies that feel that they have a lot of in-depth conversations or stories around what they're doing and introducing this to the public that you can very hardly target on different medias, because this is the public that is not consuming the traditional media anymore, or it's very hard to target them.
A few months ago, I think it was in the second episode of this second season of Sounds Like Europe, I was talking to Michal Matus. He's a Polish journalist and podcaster.
Mhm.
And it caught my eye and my attention that when he talked to me about how the average Polish podcast listener is, he told me that basically there are people from 25 to 35 that they are who listen to the most popular podcast, that but as well at the same time there is people like from over 55 and even people from more ages that are
Mhm.
right now listening to podcasts. So he
Mhm.
basically told me that there in Poland, almost all Polish people are listening to podcasts. Maybe some of are from economics, maybe comedy
Mhm.
shows, but this whole chart like covered a lot of the population there in Poland. Is it the same? Are you there in Slovenia in a similar situation?
We just had a year ago, there was only one research done in Slovenia about who are the listeners of podcasts and how many of them are there. One thing I have to really say specifically in the beginning is that Slovenia has roughly a little bit over 2 million people, the whole population. So it's very, very small. But there is around 450,000 people, so a quarter of the population, who are regular listeners of podcasts, which means regular means that they're listening at least 1 hour a week. Most of the people are what they discovered are gender wise it's very balanced. So I think it's 52% men and 48% women. Most of them are above 25 years old, which doesn't mean that younger people don't listen to podcasts, of course. And what is really interesting is that they have a higher education. Most of them live by themselves, and they when it comes to the amount of money they bring to the table that they earn, they are higher on this ladder. So higher paid, let's say, people, which was very interesting. But what I see is exactly what your guest from Poland said. It's the same here in Slovenia. You can it's not a homogeneous group of people who listen to podcasts. You can find listeners from every age group. Just before we met today, I was actually sitting with a girl who's 16 years old, and she said she listens to podcasts. So it's very very diverse, and I think that what I'd said before, that I don't think it's really important to say which are the categories or topics that people listen to. I think that people will find the things that they want to listen to, and if there is a chance that they find it on the podcast, they will listen to to these topics or this genre or conversations that they want to listen to.
And before you got to this point where even though there's kind of a small market, there's a lot of people in that market listening to podcasts. Before you got to this point, as we have been talking throughout this conversation, there have been some few years of evolving, of growing from the podcasting industry there in Slovenia. So if you had to pick one podcast or maybe a genre of podcast to make that easier for you that you consider paved the way for the industry there in Slovenia, could you
Mhm.
think of one specific podcast and why?
Well, one of them was Apparatus, which was the first podcast that happened, that had that hosted different people from different backgrounds, and it opened the place for long form conversations. This was one of them. The second one is Idea podcast, which is hosted by my colleague Klemen. He's mostly number one all the time in Slovenia with his conversations. He started maybe 6 months before me, and he has this interesting. Um, he talks to different types of people, from politicians to priests to celebrities, and he always seems to find a way to bring really interesting conversations from these people who are really from different types of backgrounds. So he's kind of like the maybe like the celebrity podcaster in Slovenia at the moment. And then there is a lot of them. We have doctors who have their own podcasts, who are discussing the stuff that is happening in their work and so on. And they are hosting doctor colleagues, and they're discussing certain things that are happening in the system or even in the field of their work and so on. So it's really a very buzzing environment in Slovenia at the
and
moment.
And looking right now into the future, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, what improvements do you expect from the future of podcasting there in Slovenia?
I think this is something that it's not only a Slovenian challenge. I think it's a challenge for all of us globally. Um, I think that podcasts are becoming a really important medium. Even now, as we're discussing this, we are 5 days away from American elections, and you can see how both candidates are using podcast platforms to discuss topics because they gain more people than traditional media. And what I think is one of the things that is really important is that the podcasters will have to um, become more aware of the responsibilities that we have. Responsibilities that we have as media platforms discussing certain topics with our audiences. I think this is one of the things that is really important to me, and I try to when I select guests, I try to really cherry pick who I really want to bring in front of the microphone that I'm using. And then the next thing is, I think that companies, what I discussed before,
Yeah, for sure.
corporate podcasts, for sure.
I have to thank you for this conversation, Nina, because it's been very, I don't know how to put it, enlightening, and I have learned a lot from podcasting there in Slovenia, and not only I have learned to pronounce the name of your podcast, but before you go, I would like to ask you just a couple more questions. These ones
Sure.
are not. They are not focused on the topic of today. These are questions I do to every guest that comes here in Sounds
Mhm.
Like Europe, and I want to know a bit more about your listening habits. As a podcaster, what's your favorite podcast right now?
Right now, oh my God, right now, Pod Save America.
And why are you listening that podcast so much these days? Maybe because of the elections.
Yeah. I've been listening to them for quite a while. I like the way they are covering the American election. I like the way they are using the platform for paid subscribers and not paid subscribers because I'm also checking how to do that. Um, and yeah, just the way they're using this platform as a sort of a building up the progressive media environment on the podcast platforms. So yes, I also have the others. I mean, I listen to a lot of them. I try to listen to a lot of Slovenian ones just to see how the market where I'm operating is developing. But at this moment, right now, I have to say I'm listening to a lot of the American podcasts because of the elections, because I'm very interested. Every 4 years, I'm very interested in this topic.
Um, and thinking about when you listen to these podcasts, uh, just imagine there's a free day for you. You have all the time in the world. When would be for you your favorite moment to listen to a podcast?
Well, every day I go for a really, really long walk over a little mountain that I have close by. So I listen to, for 2 hours, I listen to podcasts then. In the morning, if I'm alone at home, I listen to it when I'm cooking or when I'm driving a car. So basically, I don't listen to anything else but podcasts. I rarely listen to music on my phone, for instance. So yeah, big junkie.
Yeah, whenever you have
Whenever I
23
have a minute.
minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Nina Gaspari, host of Lovim ravnotežje, thanks a lot for being here on this episode of Sounds Like Europe. As I said before, talking to you has been really helpful to understand and know a bit more about the current state of podcasting in Slovenia.
Thank you, Javier.
And to everyone listening to this interview, I've been your host, Javi Caminero. Thank you for doing so, and I hope you come back in 2 weeks. Adios.
Sounds Like Europe, Cross-Border Podcasting is a WePod podcast funded by the Creative Europe programme. Hosted and written by Javi Caminero, sound design by Manu Tomillo, coordinator Alexander Damiano Ricci, executive producer Anna Ribera.